Welcome to the Harmony channel. Thank you for joining me here over at our new YouTube channel. The old one is still live and kicking, but today's conversation I feel is more appropriate for the Harmony channel. It's going to be myself here talking about Andrew Tate and his long-form interview with Patrick Bet-David. This aired Tuesday morning. I've spent a great deal of time analyzing this 3.5-hour conversation. I've been very genuine and honest and transparent with you all that I haven't fully understood the Andrew Tate phenomenon. I didn't get it, and I still don't fully get it. But I have to say, after watching this interview, I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to get the appeal of Andrew Tate. And I finally got an indication, a full indication. And maybe it's just I hadn't been looking at the right stuff. Maybe I haven't been looking in the right places. Maybe I just haven't taken enough time to figure out, like, where's his traction coming from? Well, in this long-form conversation with Patrick Bet-David and Patrick Bet-David's crew, I did get a sense of like, oh, this is Andrew Tate's appeal. This is his gimmick. Andrew Tate, in a very calculated fashion, this interview went on for like 3.5 hours, but in a very calculated fashion, he tried to paint himself as the ultimate Trump supporter, ultimate MAGA defender, ultimate MAGA soldier. He's our ally over in Europe. He's our ally in Romania. He's our ally across the pond, across the sea. He is someone that, is pretending like he wants to run for Prime Minister of the UK. He's Europe's version of Donald Trump. I think it's a gimmick. I think it's a ploy. But I want to walk you through some of the sound bites and what Andrew Tate is doing here in a very calculated fashion. And then I'm going to point out a couple of things that Andrew Tate did that I was like, oh, there it is. That's what makes Andrew Tate important. That's why people are defending Andrew Tate. I'm going to point that out as well. I want to be fair because I've been trying to understand Andrew Tate, and this interview gave me a look behind the curtain and a far better understanding than I had before going into this. But let's start with Andrew Tate very early in the interview going after Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who basically made the statement that, hey, I really would prefer Andrew Tate not to be flying into Florida and setting up camp here in Florida. Here's Andrew Tate's response to that.
And if he wants some media training, he can hit me up. There's no problem. If he wants training, wrong. There's a reason you lost the presidential election. There's a reason you got wrecked. If you want some training, come to me and I'll tell you. Your correct answer was, we have no information of crimes he's committed inside the United States. He has an American passport. We were not aware of his arrival, but it's not really our concern. He's an American citizen returning to his home country. If he breaks the law within Florida, he will be held accountable as well as any other person would be. And until that point, that's it. But instead, he just completely caved and folded. You know what's really interesting? The liberals, Soros, all these NGOs, the media, they understand something intrinsically that conservatives do not understand. In the conservative world, an accusation is the same as a conviction, which is why liberals are so effective. The liberals will accuse a conservative of something. They'll wrap-up smear them. Hello, Ron. Nancy Pelosi explained the wrap-up smear. She explained it herself. You can find the clip of her explaining. You get the media to repeat something so many times that that person's name becomes toxic. And then what that person says isn't significant anymore because of the accusations attributed to their name.
And so a little bit later in the interview, Andrew Tate goes out of his way to praise Donald Trump. And so he starts out early taking this shot at DeSantis, and then he at that time, he also goes into praising Donald Trump and saying Notice how Donald Trump didn't say anything. You know, he said, hey, I don't know. And he's saying that's how DeSantis should have handled it. He's clearly pandering to the MAGA crowd and pandering to Donald Trump. But here he does it even more explicitly. I think this is labeled clip number 3. Let's play that clip.
Trump has saved the Western world. I don't think enough people understand that if he didn't win, it would have been over for the Western world as we know it. Look at all the garbage we just talked about with my case. We talked about innocent until proven guilty being thrown out, democracy being thrown out, all this stuff. That would have been applying to everyone. All of us here would be in jail. Mm-hmm. Every man with half a backbone would be in jail. It would have been toast. There would have been a tranny in every single position of office for no reason. True. DEI everywhere. Once America fell, Europe's already fallen. It would have been over. Trump has saved the world as we know it. That is not an exaggeration. That is not hyperbole. Trump has saved the world. So the reason I am a fan of Trump is not because I agree with every single thing he does, not because I think he's a perfect person, but I can look and say he has saved the world. You know, it's actually amazing how bitter, petty, and stupid most people are. Elon Musk will put a rocket in space and then catch it. Incredible. And then someone will sit there and go, yeah, but he had a kid and he wasn't married. Can't you just let people be people and respect them for their monumental achievements and accept that nobody's infallible and nobody's perfect? These fucking Mr. Pastor in Nebraska is going to piss his pants about Elon Musk.
Church's going to be packed this weekend.
Yeah, he's going to piss his pants about Elon Musk. While Elon Musk furthers humanity. People are going to accuse Trump and piss their pants about Trump as he saves the Western world. There is a bigger picture. And anyone who is capable and smart enough of seeing the bigger picture isn't an enemy of mine. Because they look at me and go, you know what, Andrew may do some things we don't like. He may have said some things that aren't nice. But in the end, he is motivating the masculine youth to resist the slave mind programming of the Matrix. He is important in the battle against enslavement. The bigger picture is Tate is a net positive, but people are mean and they are petty and they are stupid and they are jealous. And when you add all of that up, you will take somebody as monumentally achieved as myself or people who have surpassed me in nearly every metric, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Look at all of their monumental achievements, which literally span into the atmosphere, into the cosmos, and ignore that and say, oh, he didn't get a marriage certificate. You're a dipshit. You are a dipshit who cannot understand that no human is perfect and we are all different and we're all going to have disagreements. We probably all disagree on lots of issues, but we can shake hands and agree for the common good. When you have an army, of 10,000 men, they may disagree on so many different things, but the primary objective at the time is to raid the enemy trench.
So that's Andrew Tate saying that Donald Trump saved the world, that we'd all be locked up without Donald Trump. That is clear pandering. Hey, look, there's some truth to it. I think a lot of people feel like Trump is a hero, but here's Andrew Tate on a calculated move here in America, doing an interview with Patrick Bet-David, making sure he sends out a dog whistle to all of the Trump supporters in the MAGA movement. Hey, I'm your guy. I'm with you. I'm with Donald Trump. This is all calculated. This is all part of him building an American base and wrapping himself in the MAGA flag so that MAGA people will see him as an ally and perhaps treat him the way people rallied around Donald Trump when he was having all of his false prosecutions and, you know, from Fannie Willis to Letitia James to Alvin Bragg, all these people going after the lawfare that was going after Donald Trump. Andrew Tate's trying to wrap himself up in the same defense. And he's doing it pretty effectively because people are falling for it. But Andrew Tate, as I've stated previously, is a low character exploiter of women. And he was an idiot and bragged and talked about all this stuff on videotape. He's in trouble in Romania, and I've explained this previously. He came into Romania, an outsider in their country, and tried to disrupt and tried to get involved in gambling and casinos and tried to disrupt the established criminal element in Romania. And now this idiot is running around. Well, dang, why are they coming after me? Well, you want to be a disruptor in a foreign country, whether it's a legal disruptor or an illegal disruptor, you're going to get some blowback. So Andrew Tate is in trouble because he's an idiot, because he went about his illegal business in an unsophisticated way and in a way that drew so much attention to himself. He wanted to be a big-time social media influencer. He wanted to be the most Googled man in the internet. Well, this is what comes along with that. A lot of attention and a lot of enemies. And so this whole little dog whistle to Trump supporters, hey, come support me. Smart Trump supporters will be like, nah, I'm good. So in one of the rare moments where he addressed some of the complaints of his critics, Andrew Tate basically says, and again, this isn't from direct questioning from Patrick Bet-David. Patrick Bet-David was mostly a bystander in this. He just let Andrew Tate talk and talk and talk. And a lot of people watch this because people want to hear from Andrew Tate to see what he says. But at some point, Andrew Tate kind of brings it up on his own that he's a victim. There's all this lawfare being practiced against him. And people are upset about things he said 12 years ago. That's as far as Andrew Tate's willing to go in terms of addressing the mistakes he made, and he tries to write them off as 12 years ago. We've had Common Sense Skeptic and their Matrix of Lies documentary. We've had these guys on about Andrew Tate, and it's an exaggeration to say it was all 12 years ago. Andrew Tate, in more recent years, put himself in and copped to his manipulation, exploitation, the pimping of women. We all know that's an exaggeration, but he makes a brief allusion to 12 years ago I said some stupid things. Let's play the clip.
I'm their fall guy for everything. As soon as anything goes wrong, they mention my name in the UK. I don't stand a chance in their courts. But am I afraid of them? No, because I don't operate from a realm of fear. I need people at home. You know what? This whole circumstance has truly damaged my faith in humanity. COVID did the same. Before COVID, I really thought people were better than that. But when I log onto Twitter and someone's like, Andrew Tate's accused of, I can accuse a ham fucking sandwich. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything what you're accused of. It matters what you're found guilty of. And then you have to argue about the legitimacy of the court. Because there's people in America who are getting wrecked by courts. That's America. Imagine, please, is there any better sign of my innocence than the fact I won fair and square in a Romanian court under the Biden admin? Is that not the best possible badge I can wear? When Biden was president in a Romanian court, I beat my case. And they'll still sit there and go, oh, but he's guilty. Did I say some stupid things on the internet 12 years ago? Yes. But I also said I'm an astronaut. And guess what? Elon's not calling. So it doesn't matter. It's not, you need a victim. You need proof. You can't say he said one stupid thing on the internet 12 years ago. Anyone who believes that's a criminal case is a dumbass. So here we are. You talk about Great Britain, they're after me. Romania's still after me. Ron DeSantis is after me. Aliens are probably after me. I don't know what to do. I'm just a man.
So that's Andrew Tate glossing over his own stupidity, his own illegality. That's Andrew Tate wrapping himself in victimhood and trying to cast himself as a different form of Donald Trump. Doesn't fly with me. Doesn't fly with me at all. But I do want to acknowledge there were parts of this interview where I was taken aback and was like, I get it. I get why people are caping up for Andrew Tate. And one of those key moments is, and I sent, this isn't a part, I sent this to Luke, my producer, on an individual text thread. But this is where he basically says that the World War II narrative, the narrative about Adolf Hitler and nationalism, is the foundation of everyone's understanding of what's going on in global politics right now. That everybody has this, oh my God, don't be nationalist if you're white. White nationalism is evil. And that's a fundamental understanding that everybody has. And Andrew Tate wants to question that. And he's questioning it publicly. Now, he's very careful, never uses the word Jew, but he's like, hey, I want to question the World War II narrative. And this is when I was like, oh, this is it. This is the hook that he's using. Let's play the clip.
Together to fight against it, because then they are what?
Racist.
Nazis.
Yep.
Nazis.
Yep, for sure.
So they use World War II. Let me ask you guys a question. If they use World War II to subvert white nationalism to the point of extinction, wouldn't it be truly treasonous if the story of World War II wasn't even true? What if there's another story to World War II? Is it true, the story that we know? The version of events that we know? Hitler's just crazy and he just lost his mind. I'm asking questions because in my world, I understood that victors write the history. Winners write history. Winners are always the good guys. Loser was always the bad guy. Loser had no point of view at all. The winner had all the right thing and they were doing all the right things. So I'm just asking you, if this war is what's shaping the modern world and it is bringing on the ideology which is going to lead to the extinction of the white race, isn't it important we find out if the story we're told is even true? Let me apply this to modern time. If you listen to the media and the story they tell you, Putin's crazy. Putin's nuts. And he's lost his mind. And he has no point of view at all. And he has no reason to invade Ukraine. There's no possible reason. If you research, you'll understand he actually has a pretty good argument. I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm saying that he has his beliefs. We have our beliefs. Some right, some wrong. There's no such thing as black and white. There are different varying shades of gray in every single conflict. But the Hitler story, the World War II story, is black-white. Because that's how the winners want to write it. And that's how it always goes when the war is over. And the story of Russia-Ukraine is black-white. Ukraine's innocent, we're innocent, Russia's nuts. But if you actually analyze things and understand them really, you'll see it's not that way. So this is a very interesting thought experiment. And that's what I'm doing before the media attacks me. I'm not advocating for anything. I'm not saying anything. This is a thought experiment. If one particular ideology is shaping society to the point where an entire race will go extinct, shouldn't we understand that period of history intimately? Yes or no? I would argue yes. And if that's the case, perhaps when we understand it better, perhaps white people might save themselves. Perhaps.
So, Andrew Tate has the balls to say, hey, we need to question World War II and the narrative that we bought. That nationalism is bad because Germany was nationalist before World War II and during World War II. And because Hitler was white nationalism is a bad thing because Hitler was white and a nationalist. And his argument is like, everybody else gets to be nationalist. But he doesn't say it, but he's basically insinuating, hey, black people get to run around and say black power. Black people get to run around and say, we need to do everything we can do to support Africa. Well, every other group with some color to them, or if they're Israel, they all get to be nationalists. But white people around the globe, if they're nationalists, everyone gets to say, oh, you're just like Adolf Hitler. You're going to put us in ovens. You're white supremacists. It's a fair question. It's a fair discussion. And it's a conversation and a discussion and a question that many young white men and some old white men, they want answered. And when they look around and say, well, who with a platform is willing to say these things? People will beat around the bush, but no one will say these things directly. Andrew Tate just said these things somewhat directly. And that's his value. That's why people want to defend him and want to overlook his sexual immorality, his sexual crimes, the fact that he's a pathological liar, the fact that he's not a Christian, the fact that he's actually a force for evil, people are willing to overlook that because he will defend white nationalism. And what a lot of people, they're not concerned about the white part of that nationalism. They're thrilled that he will defend nationalism. And then there are some people that are sitting there saying, hey, he's not a Christian, but his argument basically defends Western civilization's reliance and promotion of Christianity, because that's what's really under attack, is Christianity and Western civilization. And so Andrew Tate's willing to have that conversation. Is the attack on white nationalism really an attack on Western civilization, which is a byproduct of Christianity? And so people are sitting there going around like, well, if we murder Andrew Tate, no one with a big platform will be willing to have this discussion. Nick Fuentes may have this discussion, but he's been smeared as an anti-Semite, and he doesn't have the following, the reach, or the credibility of an Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is mixed race. He's half black, he's half white. When he makes this argument, no one can call him racist. And so Andrew Tate has that value, that cachet that people don't want to give up. And when I look at this and what his hook is, I sit there and ask those of us that are Christians, why won't we man up and have the discussion and have the conversation, and be able to say, hey, Hitler was wrong and what he did was wrong, but nationalism is not wrong. And that white people shouldn't have to walk around in embarrassment because of what Adolf Hitler did. That's not on American white people. And so you don't have to be ashamed of being white. You don't have to be ashamed of Christianity. You don't have to be ashamed of America because of what Adolf Hitler did. We should be allowed to have that conversation. And we should be allowed, because the conversation that he didn't make it in this interview with Petra Bet David, but the conversation a lot of people want to have is, particularly as it relates to today and as it relates to Vladimir Putin. And it's like, oh my God, how can Donald Trump or people like that, they're siding with Putin over Ukraine. I can't believe they're siding with a Russian dictator. Well, people want to have the natural conversation and say, in 1939, 1940, we sided with a Russian dictator then. His name was Joseph Stalin. He's arguably the greatest mass murderer in world history. But we can't have that conversation because we all must pretend like that Adolf Hitler was 10 times worse than Joseph Stalin. We can't make the argument that, hey man, Stalin and these communists, how many millions of Christians did they kill? Can't have that conversation. And as long as we can't have that conversation, people like Andrew Tate are going to have value. So it's really our cowardice as Christians that empowers a grifter and a pimp like Andrew Tate to be able to pass himself off as some sort of MAGA nationalist soldier. It's this interview. I mean, it was the first time where I was like, oh, okay, not going to defend Andrew Tate. Not going to do it. But I get why there is some loyalty to Andrew Tate, because we haven't filled that void. We haven't been the righteous voice for when Andrew Tate lands on a good point. We all have to run away from it because, oh, Andrew Tate's a bad guy and Andrew Tate's this or that. Look, when a broke clock is right, I give the broke clock credit. Andrew Tate's a broke clock, but he is broke. And you heard this in other parts of the interview. Andrew Tate, at one point, basically argued that monogamy and any restrictions on male sexuality or male sexual promiscuity, hey, that's our real enemy. That's what's holding the world back. Is, places like America have these rules about monogamy, and Western civilization has these rules about monogamy, and that's what's stopping men from being men. Let's play that clip.
Because I would argue that the reason we have such a problem with sexual perversion amongst our elite class in the West is because monogamy is being pushed to the front where it's unnatural to a degree for certain men. Not all men, but certain men are not interested in monogamy, and it's being pushed to the front, and people are getting to a certain level of wealth and power, and they're stuck with one wife who they perhaps don't even get along with anymore, and they're only together for a show marriage, and they don't even enjoy each other's company anymore, and they're sexually repressed, and the only place they can go to do anything sexual without getting exposed is this island. And before you know it, they end up doing more and more depraved things. You know why you don't see Russians on that island? Rich Russians? Because rich Russians are allowed 10 girlfriends. So then they have their wife and they have their play toys and they're fine, because that's the masculine imperative at a certain level and certain echelon of wealth and power and status. So if you're a man who's prepared to have a bunch of women and you have your women, you're happy enough. But if you're a man who's stuck with a woman and you don't even get along with each other and it's a show marriage and you have to be together and you argue all the time and you're sexually repressed and you're being promised in secret that you can go to an island and finally be pleasured and satisfied, no one's ever going to find out, that's how you end up on the island. So this whole monogamy garbage that's being pushed by the West, especially amongst our elites, is the reason we have the biggest problem with pedophilia. And they don't have this problem in South America because they all have girlfriends. They don't have this problem in Russia because they all have girlfriends. The Thai elites don't have this problem. They all have girlfriends. But here in the West, we're saying, nope, you just stick with your wife, only her, be happy with her. What happens if you don't get along anymore? What happens if you don't fuck anymore ever? What happens if you're not enjoying it? And you're hearing all these stories from all these people having a great time. That's why we have a perversion problem, because we're suppressing men's natural inclination to sexually mate with women who are not the one they're married to. That is actually the root of a lot of pedophilia. People say I am the problem with the West and that I'm destroying Western society. I would argue, and I'm good at that actually at a certain echelon, monogamy causes more problems than it solves.
And that's my problem with Andrew Tate. He's paving a road straight to hell. He thinks that immorality and the promotion of immorality and men just running around with no discipline and bedding and banging any woman they want, that would fix society. That will create more chaos. And so there are men that want order, that want righteousness without being righteous. Men don't want to make any sacrifice. We want our cake and we want to eat it too. We want a righteous world. We want a world filled with order. We want the patriarchy without following Jesus Christ, without pursuing holiness. See, Andrew Tate, and this is where my disconnect with Andrew Tate is, my major disconnect is, he wants to pursue happiness. He's basically a woman. He's promoting a feminine worldview, a feminine point of view on life. Hey, men should just be able to do whatever makes them happy. And if bedding this whore, that whore, and this woman and that woman and blah, blah, if that's what makes them happy, men need to be allowed to do that so that the world can be right. He wants to pursue happiness. He does not want to pursue holiness. That's why he has walked away from Christianity. He doesn't want a Lord and Savior. He wants to figure it out on his own. He wants to go a path that does not produce the results that will lead to more order, that will lead to an environment that's safe for children, that will, again, Western civilization, Christianity, the greatest thing that the world has ever seen. It's produced the freedom that was the envy of the world. It produced the innovation that was the envy of the world. The only way to get back to that is for men to pursue holiness and righteousness. Andrew Tate tells us just the opposite. And that's why I think he's part of the Sexual Liberation Unity Party or Uniparty. He's the same coin. He's just the opposite side. Whether it's heads or tails, it all leads to sexual immorality and more chaos. He later goes on to speak against intact nuclear families. This is in the Patrick Bet-David interview. He talks about, I'm a father and I'm a father with these different kids spread out. But I'm in the home 2 or 3 times a week. That's all you need. But he doesn't want the responsibility of being a man. He doesn't want the responsibility of discipling his own kids. He doesn't want the responsibility of leading a woman into holiness. He wants to pursue happiness, his sexual lust. That's where I think, or that's why I think he's allowed to exist, is because the same people that he thinks or that he's pretending that he's challenging, he's actually working with those people. They have the same end game. This is why I give E. Michael Jones a lot of credit for his book, Libido Dominandi, Sexual Liberation and Political Control. Andrew Tate wants you out there being immoral so it's easier to compromise you and leverage you and blackmail you. This man is too smart not to have figured out that man's sexual immorality is why we have so much chaos in this world. I used to be as sexually immoral as virtually anybody. I'm not some prude that doesn't know what he's talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I'm exactly right. There are sacrifices that men have to make in order to restore this country. Andrew Tate talks tough, looks tough, wears sunglasses, looks cool. He's a coward. He doesn't want to challenge himself. That's why he won't sit down and have these discussions with someone who might challenge him. Patrick Bet-David had no interest in challenging Andrew Tate. No one does. They're going to put out the sound bites. They're going to put out the clips. And everyone's going to scream and yell, look, Andrew Tate, there goes the bad guy. And then some people will look and say, no, there goes Andrew Tate, the courageous guy. And it's just going to go on and on and on and on and on. Andrew Tate isn't courageous. He's not profound. Let me take that back. He's occasionally profound. But at the end of the day, he's not a force for good. That's I ended up landing where I was at the very beginning, watching Andrew Tate sit down with Patrick Bet-David. He's not a force for good, but I now understand his appeal, and I know what the solution is. Those of us that are trying to pursue holiness, and all we're doing is trying, we have to be courageous enough to have these uncomfortable conversations and speak these uncomfortable truths so that young people don't have to look for an Andrew Tate to have a conversation that more righteous men should be leading. We got to man up. And we have to deal with the consequences of making people really uncomfortable and clueless. Like, oh my God, Jason, how dare you as a black man defend white nationalism? I'm not defending white nationalism. I'm defending Christianity. I'm defending Western civilization, which has been a byproduct of Christianity. The people that have put a color on Christianity. They're the evil ones. Christianity has no color. Now, are there certain demographics, a certain demographic that is more passionate about, more committed to Orthodox or true Christianity than others? I have to say yes. Too many black people here in America have abandoned true Christianity. We've let racial idolatry run wild in our churches. We allowed Martin Luther King and Marxists, and we allowed feminist black women to walk us away from traditional Christianity. We've walked away from marriage. We've walked away from the patriarchy. We've walked away from male leadership. We've anything that's negative and debaucherous, we call it black and we defend it. That's what we've done. And so now, in our defense of blackness, we've had to become hostile to Jesus Christ and the things taught in the Bible. That's racial idolatry. We have to stop that. If we don't, more and more people like Andrew Tate are going to become more and more influential, and they're going to continue to lead us astray. That's my take on the Andrew Tate interview. I want to bring on Common Sense Skeptic. He's been a longtime follower and critic of Andrew Tate. I'm going to give him a chance to reflect, offer some thoughts on what he saw of the interview, and then we'll call it a show. Thank you for tuning in to the Harmony channel. Common Sense Skeptic just around the corner. Next. Okay, as promised, I wanted a different perspective than my own, and so we're going to return to Canada and get one of Andrew Tate's top critics, Common Sense Skeptic. He's been on the show before. He's anonymous. They do all this monitoring and content around Andrew Tate, Elon Musk, and others. They're not getting rich, and that's why Common Sense prefers to protect his identity because, it's just not worth it to deal with the blowback. But anyway, Common Sense, welcome back. And I just wanted to give someone else a voice, an opportunity to react to Andrew Tate's interview with Patrick Bet-David. I was wondering, did you hear anything interesting or anything that perked up your ears?
Well, there's always the softball interview style with PBD, and it would be interesting to see if Tate actually takes any challenging interviews while he's in the States, because he'll go to his stable of 4 or 5 different people that he knows will just let him say whatever he wants to say. So, on the topic of human trafficking, PBD, Candace Owens, Carlson, none of them go in with a proper definition or a proper recognition of what the definition for human trafficking is. And if you're having a conversation with someone who's accused of human trafficking across 3 countries, then you should you should be able to nail down what that definition is. And they have no clue, not even the first clue, about what it takes to come up with a charge of human trafficking with the 3 components, with the AMP protocol. So the interview goes about as I would expect it to, and there's a couple of things that we can kind of touch on that really kind of show some hypocrisy, with his so-called conversion to Islam, where he shows a lack of understanding of geopolitics, even though he says that he wanted to be the Prime Minister of the UK. He's got no idea what it takes to become the Prime Minister of the UK. So if people who understand the world in general outside of the Tate echo chamber, they look at these interviews and they know how full of shit this guy actually is.
I hear you on that. This is the first time, and listen, there was a lot to this interview that I'm hypercritical of, and I unpacked a lot of that before you got here. But I also had to acknowledge that this was the first time I've heard Andrew Tate, and maybe it's the first time I paid close attention, certainly the first time I've listened to something that went on as long as this did. But I did come away like, oh, this is what makes him appealing. These are the things that he says that no one else will say, and it may explain why they put up with all the BS. And so, like, he goes on a pretty extensive, there's a 10-minute, 15-minute chunk of the interview where they talk about white nationalism and how white people aren't allowed to be nationalistic, but every other ethnic group or racial group can be. And I heard that and I said, oh, okay. This is what makes people loyal to Andrew Tate, because they feel like he's the only guy with a big platform who will defend America and countries that are predominantly white. And so that was the first time I really had a clue as, okay, this is why they want to overlook the flaws, because he's willing to say this. That fascinated me.
So you remember the last time, a couple days ago when I was on with you, I was going through the 3-part grooming process that he goes through with the boys, right? We went through the girls and through the boys. So this is the first part of the Tate grooming, is telling people what they want to hear in this regurgitated type of nonsense throne speeches that he does. And okay, fine. White nationalism is in a topic now. Being proud to be white has been shamed for years, if not decades. All the different things that he's saying about what's happening with Britain and the UK, yeah, certainly true. Where the Islamists are praying in the streets, and try doing that as a Christian, you get arrested. Fair enough. But the level of intelligence, the level of understanding he actually has on these particular topics is very limited. You know, he says that he wanted to become the Prime Minister of the UK so that he could deal with this and bring pride back to Britain and make the British strong again, which is something totally beyond his scope. But you don't run for Prime Minister of Britain the way Trump ran for President of the US. That's not how it's done. You don't go to the UK, not that he can go to the UK because of the criminal and civil charges against him, but you can't just declare that you're going to run for Prime Minister. You have to form a party. That party has to have members in all the different constituencies, which is 543 in the UK alone. You have to have people running in all of those. And then in the election, you have to be the leader of the party that gets not necessarily the majority, but the most seats than everybody else, because you can't have minority parties and coalition governments. But then the person who is the leader of the party, after the election, he has to get basically ordained by the king. The king has to ask him to form parliament, and at that point, you become prime minister. But you have to get elected in your own district. You have to be the leader of the party that gets the most number of seats in the election, and then the king has to sign off on you. Pretty similar in Canada, except the Governor General acts on behalf of the king. So, you know, we have our 343 ridings here, and whatever party's going to win the next one is going to have to get the largest number of those seats. So again, he doesn't understand what it takes to become the prime minister, but he'll get all this press and all these interviews, and they'll be talking about how Andrew wants to run for the prime minister of the UK. And it's just garbage. He doesn't understand it. But the people who are listening to him understand the topic even less, so it looks like he knows what he's talking about.
Here's where I would push back against you, and it's not, I agree with you that him running for prime minister is BS. But I don't think that's the takeaway. That I think other people are like, well, this guy's not going to be prime minister. But he is going to defend nationalism. He is going to defend the way things used to be in the country I grew up loving, or the country that I thought I was being a part of. And so he speaks to people's a primary issue for people, and they look around and says, hey, no one else is willing to say this. No one else is willing to say that all this illegal immigration is changing our country in a way that makes me uncomfortable, because they're afraid of being called racist. And he connects it, what I thought in a very provocative way. It was like, hey man, World War II is like our foundational understanding of the world and has been for the last 80 years or more. Yeah, 80 years, World War II. And he's saying, he's saying like, hey man, because Hitler was a nationalist doesn't mean nationalism is bad. And because Hitler was white and a nationalist, it doesn't mean white nationalism is bad. And it's like, that's a true statement that most people run away from saying because they don't want to be called a sympathizer of Hitler. They don't want to be called anti-Semitic. And so I think most people dismiss the, hey, I want to be prime minister of the UK. And what they're attracted to is like, hey, someone is saying what I believe, that all this immigration that we've allowed and all these people we've allowed to come into our country and change the culture of the country dramatically, I want someone to speak against that. And Andrew Tate does it, and he does it in a pretty bold fashion that, you know, and the guy's a pimp, he's a fraud, he's grifting and all that, but he is saying these things that are true that everyone else seems afraid to say.
Well, he definitely knows how to tune into the populism message, and there's no doubt about that. But the guy has all the spine of a jellyfish, and you know that by looking at how he flops back and forth between being a Muslim and being a Christian, right? The guy doesn't actually have a moral center. If you think he does, then we need to talk some more. Because when he's in Dubai, he's a Muslim. Today, he was a Muslim. At Christmas time, he was a Christian, and he wanted to run for the PM of UK as a Christian. So the guy's wishy-washy as a face cloth, and he really, all he does is contradict himself. You can catch him out on anything. Doesn't matter what he said something different before. He said something different about crypto. A couple of years ago, he was never getting involved in a crypto scheme because he didn't want his followers to get completely screwed out of their money. Now he's had, what, half a dozen failed crypto projects, including his daddy coin, right? He doesn't have a moral center. Whatever it takes to extract money from your pocket is what Andrew Tate will tell you.
He exists at a time, and I'm just talking about America. It's difficult for me to speak about other countries. He exists in a time where many Americans believe, well, that's all politicians. They're really no different from Andrew Tate. They're as sexually and immorally compromised as Andrew Tate, and they have no spine, just like Andrew Tate. But at least Andrew Tate speaks to this one issue that's near and dear to me. And it's the first time I was like, oh, okay, now I see why this gimmick works, because I'm in total agreement with you. It's a gimmick. But today was the first time I was like, I finally understand why this gimmick is working. And he's making these over-the-top appeals to President Trump. He's making over-the-top appeals to the whole Maga movement. I'm your guy. I'm going to defend you. I'm a soldier. I'm being persecuted because the things you believe, I believe and say. And look, I'm late. Obviously, maybe I haven't done enough homework, and I'm talking to someone that's done a lot of homework on Andrew Tate. And you know, you see through the BS, and that's all you can see. But I think today I saw where, like, okay, I see how he sets the hook, and it's a pretty effective hook. And the failure really is on me and other so-called conservative influencers, because we're leaving these gaps of honesty and difficult conversations. We're leaving it to fraudsters and idiots and grifters and opportunists like Andrew Tate, rather than taking on those topics ourselves.
I think that's pretty fair. I mean, what you're looking at here is basically the blind squirrel getting a nut, where Tate gets the occasional thing right and it resonates with you. And apparently that message has. But if the guy was a murderer and he went out and he murdered 3 people, does he get credit for all the days where he didn't kill somebody? Or if he's a thief, does he get credit for all the days he didn't go to the bank or didn't go to the jewelry store and stick a gun in her face? No, the guy's slime. He might have a message or two that resonates, but at his core, this is not an honorable man. This is not a moral man. If there's a God above, then he's going to live and die in prison. And it doesn't matter to me if it's in Romania or the UK, or hopefully the US DOJ finally gets on track with the information they've got out of the Florida case. But he deserves prison. We deserve to not hear anything from him again. And that message deserves to have a better spokesperson saying it.
Well, if we don't replace him with someone willing to talk about these issues without his flaws, he'll just be replaced by another fraudulent grifter like himself. The other thing that I think Christians will say is, like, if you study the great men of the Bible, some of them were murderers, certainly adulterers. They were flawed, very flawed men. Again, it's part of the reason why Christians are so tolerant of Donald Trump here in America, is because, like, hey, we've seen God use flawed men. That's all he did in the Bible. And I'm not, because Andrew Tate, as you pointed out, he's pretending to be a Muslim. He's certainly not a Christian. He certainly has no moral compass, because the other part of today was clear as day. A big part of his argument is like, morality standing in the way of our progress as men. We need more immorality. We don't, all these rules about monogamy and trying to live righteously, that's standing in our way. So I'm very well aware that Andrew Tate is a part of the uniparty for sexual malfeasance and sexual immorality. He's not proposing a solution. He's trying to benefit off some truisms, but yeah, he has no moral compass. You're 1,000% right about that.
So what I would interject there is that if you're going to use the Christians in the Bible, or the saints, the flawed men, the murderers, whatever, in order for them to be accepted and to be loved by God and to have their sins forgiven, they have to repent. And Andrew has not repented about anything. He has not apologized about anything. He's borne false witness. He's gone above and beyond to dox at least two of the victims that he's had, the Moldovan rape victim and a girl from Florida. He goes out of his way to destroy the people he's hurt. There's nothing Christian about that. He's never apologized for it. He's never repented. And until he does that, we can't even consider a biblical argument against him.
I think you're right. And it's, you've nailed things that, there's no doubt he's a pimp, was a pimp, came to whatever a level of riches he has through the manipulation and the exploitation of young women. He was allowed again today to somewhat brush that off without even being challenged or really even strongly questioned. He kind of brought it up himself. Oh, those are things I said 12 years ago and blah, blah. That does amaze me. However, I do see this gap in the market. There's a supply and demand. There's a demand that's not being met, and so he's meeting that demand of, like, he's going to speak to the angry white man or woman who has watched their country in Europe or their country here in America get completely reshaped by people that apparently have no respect for American values or American traditions and customs, and you're just supposed to put up with it. And if you complain, you're a racist. I somewhat, reluctantly was like, I got to hat tip the guy. He's recognized a shortage in the market or a hole in the market, and he's filling it, and he's trying to save himself while doing it. Hats off to you guys, you and Murder by Crayons, for staying on top of this. Thank you again, Common Sense, for taking the time to educate my audience and give a different or more nuanced and a perspective from someone who's been tracking this very closely for a long time. I appreciate you, and I want to suggest that your series on it, is it Andrew Tate, The Matrix of Lies? Or refresh my memory again about they can go to YouTube and find some of your great work on Andrew Tate.
So the 2023 series was Matrix of Lies. The 2024 series was Matrix of Lies, Brothers in Crimes, and that's after the second criminal charges came down against both the brothers for a total of 35 victims, on top of this 7 from the original indictment. So the first case is indicted, indictment's getting changed up a little bit to correct a couple of procedural issues. Cases have not been dropped. Nobody will be able to provide you with a document from Romanian courts that says that the cases have been dropped. They have not. Tate said in that interview that he's due back in Romania on March 23rd. If he gets on that plane, great. If not, then the Romanian authorities will be able to use that portion of the interview to persuade the American government to send him back to Romania, because he is aware he needs to be back as part of his bail conditions on March 23rd.
He made a pretty bold proclamation that, I'm going back. I'm not running away from this. Do you buy that? Is he 100% being honest there? Do you think he has every intention of going back to Romania?
I don't think the man's capable of saying an honest word ever. So we'll know for sure once he's on that plane and the plane doesn't somehow disappear over the Atlantic on his way back. But until he's actually back in DICOT custody, considering that they cleared out the warehouse of all their personal belongings and brought 20 suitcases worth of their personal goods to the U.S., it's a coin flip. Does he actually go back? Is he forced to go back, or does he go into hiding and claim some sort of fake asylum here? Because he's got the criminal. Some people were saying online on Twitter there today that the U.S. won't extradite because they think it's only a civil matter, and it's not a civil matter. There's a criminal case in the UK waiting for them. There's at least one criminal case indicted in Romania. There's another one in process in Romania. These are all criminal charges, and yes, absolutely, countries do extradite on criminal charges.
Well, the statement you made about them clearing out their place where they're living, is that a well-known fact, or how did you get that information that they packed up 20 bags and most of their stuff? Where'd that information come from?
That was published Main Street Media. You can just Google Andrew Tate 20 suitcases, and I'm sure it'll come up for you.
Wow. Well, once again, thank you, Common Sense. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time. All right, that was Common Sense Skeptic. I think that's all I want to say. I just wanted to, I had a lot to say earlier. I wanted to hear from Common Sense and someone, again, who's been following this and tracking this longer than me. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.